when you hear people talking about bands or music and you hear that classic saying their old stuff is better than their new stuff? Well, according to the fans, that's the case with the 4th generation Subaru Liberty, or if you're watching this from somewhere else, Subaru Legacy. But is that just looking at these through like rose-tinted glasses? Because surely after at least 15 years, these must be riddled with problems and issues. You should never really consider buying one. Or should you? Let's find out. Now, firstly, just on that whole naming thing, look, yeah, you guys might call it a Legacy. We call it a Liberty because here in Australia, the wonderful organisation that looks after our veterans and their families are called Legacy, and Subaru wanted to pay respect to them, hence Liberty. Now, if you go hunting through the classifieds hoping that there's going to be a nice wide range of different trim specs to choose from, well, you're going to be in luck because between 2003 and 2009 here in Australia, there were 22 different variants of this. And internationally, especially in Japan, somehow there were even more. Plus the Outback, which technically is a whole different model, but it isn't really because it's basically just a lifted and plastic-clad Liberty wagon. And actually, just on the wagon, even when it comes to like the core choices, you can have a wagon or this, the sedan. Then there's a choice of 5 different engines with autos or manuals, and there was a mid-cycle update in 2006. And how do you spot an updated Liberty? Well, it's actually really easy. You know how some people do that kind of, like that cat eye makeup with eyeliner, like this? Well, Subaru did that to the Liberty, like this. Now, look, obviously there were updates to the tech and the equipment, and the mechanicals were also revised, but overall, Subaru just wanted an excuse to do cat eye makeup. Really, the only consistent thing across these 4th generation Liberties is that they all feature Subaru's signature symmetrical all-wheel drive system and boxer engines. Now, with all of the attention and hype that the WRX and even the BRZ get, to many, the Liberty is seen as the underrated and underappreciated Subaru, and our test car here is arguably the underrated and underappreciated Liberty. See, while the turbocharged models seem to draw most of the attention, to many, it's these 6-cylinder models that kind of offer the real sweet spot of the range. Plus, and look, we'll get deeper into what these cost later in the video, but the 6 cylinders generally don't ask anywhere near as much when it comes time to buy. And if you are thinking about buying one, look, unless you're happy to completely drain your savings account, a smarter option might be financing it. And if that's the case, you should click the driver link down there. Yes, this is an ad, but trust us, it's going to be good for you. See, with Driver, you can do the entire application process easily online. You can choose which finance package works best for you. There are no hidden fees, and you can get pre-approval in just minutes. Plus, if you do all of that by hitting that driver link down there, you're going to get $150 worth of free fuel. But we want to give you even more deals and more free stuff. So hit the WIPERTECH link down there to buy some awesome WIPERTECH wiper blades, and you're going to get 15% off and free express shipping. Guys, they're easy to order online, they're delivered to your door, they're easy to fit, they fit perfectly, and they wipe with the same efficiency that Subaru's blow head gaskets. I'm kidding, they're really good wiper blades, go get some. Okay, now back to the Liberty, and let's talk exterior for a minute. We'll cover like all the exterior problems and a whole bunch of other problems later in the video, but talking looks for a moment, I've got to come clean with you about something. It's a bit embarrassing, but I have a really unhealthy love for performance wagons, and that's why we've chosen a sedan for the video. Otherwise, I'd be completely biased in this entire review process. So even in sedan, I love it, but the wagon, oh my God. But look, overall, I really do think that both of them have aged really gracefully. They're both still really attractive cars. They're kind of sensible, but a little bit sporty. On the base models with the smaller wheels and the standard ride height, okay, not quite as appealing, but like the 18-inch wheels, lowered just a little bit, like the tuned by STI ones, again in a wagon, oh, yes please. Also, I think the other reason that these still look so good is that the generations after these, maybe this is just me, but I feel like Subaru kind of beat them around the head a bit with like the blunt end of an ugly stick. This still looks good, the ones after it, not so much. But this brings us to the TBTL factor. What's the TBTL factor? It is the turn back to look. You know, when you lock a car and you walk away and you look back at it, where does it rate? For me, okay, in sedan form, I'm going to go 6.3. Nick, the absolute legend that has lent us this, he loves the sedans, that's fine. For me, I like the wagons. If it was the wagon and the tuned by STI one, 9. Easy 9. So I lived with a brand spanking new 4th generation 2.5 premium wagon back in the day as a company car, And back then, these things really gave like the likes of Audi and BMW and Mercedes-Benz a run for their money when it comes to interiors. And these days, it's still really impressive. Like design-wise, it's clearly aged, right? But it's aged so gracefully. It's kind of one of those, like, because it's a bit of a minimal design, there's not a lot of design highlights going on. It's just, it's like really nice architecture. It still looks good, even 15 years later. Like, even when it comes to the materials used, the dashboards can have some major issues. We'll get to that later in the video. But all of the touch points, like steering wheel, everything here, everything you touch, it still feels good. Like, there's no movement in any of that center console. Good quality. Now, as far as wear and tear goes, we're actually going to start with that 2.5 Premium that I used to drive. My boss back then, he still owns that car. It was basically our delivery van for delivering musical instruments and drum kits and stuff all around basically New South Wales. Still owns the car. It's got hundreds of thousands of kilometres on it. I checked it out the other day, and the interior is still looking really good. It has been abused, and the interior is still holding up really well. Even with this car, Nick that owns this, the legend Nick that owns this, that's lent it to us, 264,000 kilometres. Let's go through this. Steering wheel, not too bad. Obviously getting pretty shiny and losing a bit of texture, but that can probably be restored. The leather on the seats, like the leather is still quite supple. It's aging, but not badly. All the silver, like all the silver paint areas are quite good. The door handles, we'll get to the issues these can have, but like this actually looks good with this carbon fiber wrap on it now. But generally speaking, wear and tear, 264,000 Ks, it's been everywhere. Excellent. Although ergonomics, and this used to bug me with the one I drove all the time, and maybe it's just my height, I just wish the seat went a little bit lower, and I wish the steering wheel could kind of come up and back a touch more. Still heaps of adjustability, and it's kind of a sign of the age of the car, but I can never get totally comfortable. I'd love to feel what one of these are like with like some proper Recaros in it. That'd be pretty awesome. Also, just another thing, when it comes to using everything in the interior, like everything still feels good. Like the indicator switches or the buttons, everything still feels premium. Like there's no weird movement to anything. It's very impressive. And then practicality up front, you've got a little cubby hole here. You've got two cup holders here with little flaps for small pretentious coffees like Ristretto, double macchiato, something like that. Little storage spot here, which you can put your phone, but it's a little bit dicey with the gear knob. Ashtray and cigarette lighter. Going to ignore that, it's disgusting. Little storage spot up here, which is felt lined, which is good. Decent sized glove box with another little cubby hole there. Door pockets that are an okay size. That's it for practicality up the front. Now in the back seat, I'm exactly the same height as another hugely underrated Subaru legend, World Rally Champion Richard Burns. This is in my driving position, and it's pretty comfy. Okay, knees are kind of scraping up against the back of the seat, and there's not a whole lot of foot-room, but the seat itself is very comfy. And this leather, I'm not going to say it feels new, but it's super supple. I thought it'd be a bit kind of tarnished for its age, but yeah, it's nice. Good glass house as well. It's a nice place to be. And then practicality in the back seat, you've got two nets for any fish when you go fishing. There's another ashtray. Ooh. There's a very cool, like flip out kind of transformery style cup holder there. And an armrest here, which is cool. And also you can access the boot via that, which is pretty cool. That's it for the back seat. Now in the boot of the sedan, pretty good practicality actually. Obviously the wagon fits way more. In fact, I know from experience that the wagon can fit easily 4 full drum kits and still have room on the passenger seat for your best mate that gets way too drunk at the Tamworth Music Festival and then makes the trip back from Tamworth, which normally takes 3 hours, ends up taking 7 hours. Doesn't it, Pete? Now look, don't go getting too excited about the technology and the features in this car because it is from the early 2000s. Tech in the early 2000s didn't even know what tech was. But in the really early base models, you'll still get all of this. However, spend a little bit more and spec up to a more recent and higher spec model, and you can get all of this and more. Now look, obviously with 22 different variants over the course of this many years, what you get is going to vary enormously depending on exactly which trim spec you end up looking at. But for a full guide of what each of these get, jump on ReDriven.com and check out the awesome ReDriven cheat sheet. It's also completely free, and it should answer any questions you have. Now look, obviously you can forget about these things coming standard with Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. That technology didn't exist back then. Even Bluetooth connectivity and a reversing camera, no such thing back then. There was, but these didn't come with it. The good news is, as Nick has done, it's easy to fit that technology with aftermarket equipment. But as Nick has also done, make sure you use quality equipment. We've heard some horror stories when it comes to people fitting like cheap, dodgy items off eBay or Alibaba. Get good ones. Now look, as far as safety goes, one of Subaru's big selling points is the inherent safety that comes with its symmetrical all-wheel drive system. But the thing is, eventually, physics will win. So what happens then? Well, look, to take you through exactly what safety features you can expect, we're going to cut to a voiceover, but it seems only appropriate that we do this with some old school tech.
At the very minimum you can expect ABS brakes, multiple airbags, and traction control, while later models received electronic stability control and electronic brake force distribution. This all contributed to a 5-star safety rating in NCAP testing. However, that test was done 20 years ago, so this shit ain't all that safe these days.
And again, guys, if you need all of the specific details, ReDriven.com, check out the cheat sheet. Okay, so what is a 6-cylinder Liberty with over 260,000 kilometers on the clock like to drive in the real world? Let's do the negatives first. Okay, the steering. This isn't an age thing. These Liberties have always, for me, just felt a little bit light and vague with steering. It almost feels like the front tyres are maybe overinflated. They're not, but yeah, steering doesn't grab me. But besides that, yeah, I can't find any other negatives. There's nothing else I don't like. So let's do the positives. So look, Subarus have such a signature feel about them. I don't know if it's like the all-wheel drive system or the fact that the center of gravity is so low because of the boxer engines, but this generation for me nails that Subaru feel. The previous generations of these, like they're great too, but they might be a bit like overly raw or maybe a bit too visceral for some people. But then the generation after this, that was the first one that really incorporated loads of electronics and heaps of safety features. And it for me just feels a bit disconnected, like you're not actually part of the driving equation. But this thing, even at like below the speed limit, yeah, it feels the way a Subaru for me should feel. And then we have the suspension. Now, I'm pretty sure Nick has fixed up a few of the common issues that this suspension can have. Like, it feels honestly like a new car. I think this feels better than the new Liberty I used to drive as a company car when it was new. It's just beautiful suspension. Like, it's compliant and it's soft, yet it's still really confident, really controlled. Like, we're driving through the suburbs of Sydney, so I'm hardly going to give it, the full beans through the corners, but even a little bit of fun driving, it just feels so secure on the road all the time. I'll find out what suspension's on it and I'll put it in the description below, because this suspension feels excellent. And then look, we get to this engine. Look, I'll be honest, I'm a pretty big Porsche fan, and I've been incredibly fortunate to drive a bunch of flat six Porsches, and this is a hell of a compliment for this car. But this engine, it does have real Porsche kind of vibe and feel about it. Like, powering on here, just so smooth, that beautiful linear power delivery. It's just like, it's not super powerful, it's not going to throw you back in the seat, but it's the way it delivers its power. It's so enjoyable. Flexing that right foot, that through the entire rev range, it's just enjoyable. Partly because it sounds so bloody good. Again, Nick has put an aftermarket exhaust on this. I don't know what it is. I'll find out. I'll put it in the description. But it sounds, so good. Like, that was like 40 to 60 kilometers an hour. Sounds fantastic. Also, it's not droney. We had to do some 100-kilometer-an-hour sections to get here, and it doesn't drone in the cabin. It sounds nice and quiet. Great exhaust system. I'll find out what it is. Just on the engine as well, look, I know a lot of people are really mourning the loss of the V8, but let's spare a thought for a naturally aspirated 6 as well, because this thing, I'm not going to say it's a masterpiece of an engine, but it's bloody impressive. Now, fortunately for the shoot, this is a manual transmission, a 6-speed manual, and it's lovely. It'd be nice if the shifts were a little bit shorter, but for what this car is about, it's not like an overt performance car, but it's, again, super enjoyable to use. Clutch is a little bit on the heavy side. I don't know what Nick has fitted either. Around town, that would probably get a bit annoying, but yeah, shift feel, excellent. Also on the noise, when we were going through the owners groups and talking to owners and Subaru specialists and whatnot, there are a lot of complaints about rattly interiors and weird noises and squeaks. I don't know if Nick has like just pulled this interior apart and completely refitted it, but like these are rough road there. No, none. There are no rattles in this car. There are no weird squeaks. From the back, nothing. It sounds new, newer than new. I don't know what he's done, but God, he's done a great job with this car. Look guys, overall, if you've got your heart set on one of these but with one of the turbocharged power plants, please go and drive a 6-cylinder first. Look, fast does not equal fun, and I argue that this offers a more unique driving experience than the Turbo 4. Also, if you're looking at buying one of the naturally aspirated 4-cylinder ones, go and check out a 6-cylinder first. For the little bit of extra money, it is so worthwhile because it's so much more enjoyable to drive. But that's if you should buy one at all, and we'll answer that question later on. Okay, now when it comes to buying one of these, the prices can vary pretty enormously. Like the really cheap, unloved, super high kilometres ones, they can start from as little as like $2,000. However, they are going to cost you way more than that in the long run. And the really, really special ones, anywhere from like 25 to 30 grand. But these highly underappreciated and underrated 6-cylinder models, like even pretty good ones, can range from 10 to 15 grand. Now guys, we know this might seem like a bargain, but it's important to remember that heaps of these on the used market have north of 200,000 kilometers on them. A lot of them have multiple previous owners, and loads of them have very, very sketchy histories. Also guys, we haven't delved into like what can go wrong with them yet. Plus, these generally require premium fuel, and with where fuel prices are going at the moment, with what some owners have claimed their fuel consumptions are, it can be a bit financially terrifying. Also, as you may know, Subarus can have quite the appetite for oil, but the good news is because these share a whole bunch of components across the entire Subaru range, and these have a huge and fantastic fan base, parts and labour and advice and all the availability is pretty good. Subaru Liberty fans, especially the 4th generation fans and the owners groups, oh my God, you guys are legends. The amount of advice and help you've given us to make this video is honestly epic, especially Nick, that lent us his car, and the other Nick, for sending me like this PDF document that's like the ultimate guide. It will be on the cheat sheet. But in saying that, now we're going to betray all of them and tell you what goes wrong with these. Okay, let's start with the exterior. Firstly, on the wagons, the paint on the plastic tailgate garnish and the spoiler, it doesn't stand up to the sun. And when they're removed for painting, the panel can often break. Now, the power window motors, they can also fail. You can refurbish them, but you're probably better off just buying new ones. Next up, the central locking and the door lock actuators, they have a habit of failing these days. They're not expensive parts, but they are a pain in the ass to fix. The reversing lights can fail, especially on the 6-speed manuals, and the switch itself is bloody hard to replace. Now, depending on where you live, you might have some issues with rust. Check under the roof rails, under the scuff plates, and check for rust around the front of the sill. Now, the little bolts that hold the under protection tray on are really soft and can snap really easily. A lot of owners just completely remove that tray, but then that exposes the underside of the engine to the elements, and there is some pretty important stuff at the bottom of the engine. Now, one of the big issues, especially with the performance-focused models, is accident damage, potentially even worse, repairs that have been done on the cheap. So check for any dodgy repair work. In fact, there's a whole bunch of other stuff you need to check. Go watch our Ultimate Used Car Buyer's Guide before you hand over your cash for one of these, or really any used car. Could save you thousands. Okay, now inside, as I alluded to before, the bloody dashboards, they can do all sorts of things. They can crack, they can peel, they can get kind of like glossy and like tacky, they can discolor. Major pain in the ass. Now this next one, it's not so much an exclusive Liberty issue, it's like a Subaru problem, and I've had this as well on my Subarus. The bushes for the shifter can go bad, and it turns out that the knob, it kind of goes like sloppy or just kind of like a floppy feeling. As I said, I had some really bad issues with my floppy knob, but Jim, our resident mechanic, got his hands all over the floppy knob, and with his expertise, the knob suddenly got like firm and confident all over again, almost immediately. Now next up, the check engine light. It has a habit of like illuminating, but according to many owners, if you just ignore it, the problem goes away. Now the next issues surround the HVAC or the air conditioning system. Basically the little motors that control the flaps that direct air to either your feet or your face, they can fail and play up, and getting to them to fix can be a major pain in the ass. Sorry about that. Now, if the Liberty you're looking at has the Macintosh speakers, chances are they've degraded over the time, or they've probably just heard better days. Now, as it did in Nick's car here, the door handle coatings can go really, really bad, but just replace it with this kind of cool carbon fiber wrap and all is fixed. The clocks, they can fail. Now, as I alluded to with the leather interiors, if you're like Nick and you maintain them properly, they remain nice and supple like this. If you don't, the leather goes all hard and it cracks and splits and it's just gross. Oh, also just on leather, a lot of owners have claimed that the steering wheel leather, it also splits and falls apart, and the carpet at this kind of age and high kilometres, it can go pretty bad too. Now guys, if you've made it this far in the video, we're thinking that hopefully you've enjoyed it so far. If that's the case, why not hit the like, subscribe and bell button down there, go and follow us on the socials, and if you really want to support us to help us make more videos, go and join our Patreon or maybe buy some merch. Okay, now to the really scary stuff. Mechanically, what can go wrong with a 4th gen Liberty? I can't tell you because I'm not a qualified mechanic, but Jim is.
Some say these were the last of the good Subaru Liberties, or Legacies, depending on where you're from. And I sort of get it. The 4 cylinders, that's the EJ, the later models went on to have the FA and FBs. There was no diesel option, which is a good thing because those early Subaru diesels are a pain in the ass. And they have a conventional auto instead of a CVT, and those CVTs are a nightmare. There are some complaints where the centre diff gets torque bind and just doesn't work at all. Although that adjustability isn't on all models, and it's certainly not a really common problem. It's certainly not as common as the wheel bearing issues that nearly all Subarus have. And there are some electronic complaints, but really not a huge problem. The EJ engine platform is far from perfect though. They have a lot of issues with head gasket leaks. Typically that's coolant and oil leaking from the left-hand bank. Now that typically leaks right down onto the exhaust manifold and becomes very stinky, and if you want to fix it properly, you've got to take the heads off, and it's usually a few $1,000s to fix properly. They also have issues with leaking valve cover gaskets and oil cooler seals, all leaking down the exhaust and all very stinky. They can be plagued with oxygen sensor and catalytic converter issues, and they do tend to use a lot of oil, so if you have one or you're looking to get one, you'll need to check it regularly and top it up often. And they're expensive to service because they've got a timing belt. Now that's due every 100,000 Ks, as are the Iridium spark plugs, and that can all add up to a pretty expensive service. With the turbo versions, we find typically they're pretty reliable, where most of the problems for the normally aspirated ones carry over. Where the problems start with the turbos is poor tunes, or just people just leaning on them way too hard. If they've been well serviced and they've got a good tune and they're not being flogged, typically they're okay. The internet might disagree with me on that, but you know, they're not mechanics. Now, the EZ30, 6-cylinder, normally aspirated petrol, pretty good and a little bit more reliable than the 4 cylinders, but they too have plenty of issues. Oil leaks are a big issue. They leak from the valve cover gaskets, the timing case, and the oil cooler seals. They too are prone to oil consumption, so keep a good eye on that. Now, these things have a timing chain, not a timing belt, so they're a little bit cheaper to maintain. Higher mileage ones, or neglected, they can have some timing chain and tensioner issues, but not a huge problem. Now, all of them, the 6 cylinders and the 4 cylinders, are prone to the air conditioning compressors just completely failing. The drive belt tensioner and the idler pulleys, that can often just disintegrate. Now, with the drive belt pulleys, when that belt shreds, I've seen on a 4 cylinder, I've seen it shred so bad that it's damaged the timing cover and almost take out the timing belt too, so keep a good ear on that. The manuals, they do have the typical floppy gear selector issue, and as Adam touched on, his Impreza had the problem, but I fixed that up. Just with bushes, basically, pretty straightforward. The clutch hydraulics can also be a little bit leaky when they get higher mileage with this sort of age on them too. The autos, if they've been well serviced, are way more reliable than the later model CVTs, so generally not too much of a problem. Now, I just want to loop back to that very expensive timing belt service, which is due every 100,000 Ks. Typically, at 100,000 Ks, the first one, no one ever balks at it, they just do it. But by the time the second one comes around 200,000 Ks, often people choose not to do it. In fact, some people choose to sell the car. We see in the workshop people have just bought this second-hand Subaru, fairly cheap, around 200,000 Ks, to bring it in just to find out that it needs a really expensive timing belt service. So if you're looking to buy one, make sure that service has been done. And if it hasn't, you can use it as a good bargaining chip to maybe buy it at a better price.
Now guys, look, we know this all seems like a whole lot of doom and gloom, but realistically, not every Liberty is going to have all of these problems. Like Nick with this car, he's had no dramas with this thing, and there are plenty of faultless examples out there. However, in saying that, these are just the common issues that we've found. You shush, camera, shush. These are just the common issues that we've found. There are heaps more like weird sporadic ones, and they're all going to be on the cheat sheet. So look guys, overall for the what goes wrong section, unless you're some sort of like, shush, unless you're some sort of like Liberty expert, make sure you get a full pre-purchase inspection done. That's if you should buy one, and we should probably answer that, shouldn't we? Okay, so I've got a question for you, and be honest with me here. how much of a car person are you? Because if you have no interest in tinkering with your car, let alone constantly repairing it, or you just want something practical, reliable and affordable, only buy a 4th generation Liberty or Legacy if it has low kilometers, has only had a couple of owners, is in absolutely perfect condition, and you can categorically confirm that it has had a faultless service and maintenance history. Otherwise, guys, just buy a Camry. Yeah, they're boring, but they never die. But if you're a true car enthusiast, meaning that you love to work on your car just as much as driving it, and you found an amazing example, and you promise me that you have the love, desire, time, and money to maintain it to the degree it needs, okay, yeah, look, buy one, but why not buy one of the 6 cylinders instead of a turbo 4? Like, it's arguably more unique, potentially more reliable, and it still offers all of the driving thrills that really anyone needs. Plus, you might just avoid some of the common dodgy tuning and modifying issues that are all too often seen attached to the turbo variants. Plus, the 6 cylinders are generally cheaper as well, so that just means more money for some really high quality and professionally fitted mods. Or maybe just fixing it. Now, all of this brings us to the big question: would you buy one of these, or would you get like maybe a Mazda 6 MPS, maybe something European like a Passat or a Skoda, something like that? Let us know in the comments below. See you guys next time. And with where fuel prices are going, and considering some of the claimed my brain just stopped. Here we go.
Some say these were the last of the good Subaru Liberties, or Legacies depending on where you're from.
I've seen you buff up before.
Oh God, okay. Oh Jesus. Can you tell like there's tears of laughter coming out of my eyeballs still?
You're great.